What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of you for Bleach: The Thousand Year Blood War. So this is actually going to be two episodes. Episodes, I think, 25 and 26. With me, as always, I have Blue Spade. Um, but
Um,
yeah,
it was
well, I was going to
yeah
say instead of like I thought it was going to be one longer episode, but it's actually just two episodes, two standard length episodes.
yeah. I
Because I
mean
think
it.
I think last
I,
time it was I think it was like a bit longer, but we had some longer episodes at the end of the first core. Um,
yeah, but unlike the first season, it just ended off in such a weird way that there was no hook for like a potential of course the third core,
yeah,
which is going to be airing sometime in 2024. But it also felt it also ended really the second episode, of course, ended really quickly and for whatever reason, the last 5 minutes of that last episode was the illustrated guide to Soul Reapers or Shinigami Cup in Japan. If whoever's watching this, but it just yeah, it's it just ended off in such a weird inconclusive manner of sorts.
yeah. It wasn't really like the ending of the first core where it felt like it was fairly conclusive in terms of sort of like with Ichigo, for instance, with I am the Blade or the Blade is me, with him sort of coming to the realization that that realization about who Zangetsu really is and what he really is. It felt like it was fairly conclusive in that manner. Whereas it felt like it with this episode, it just kind of ends with in the middle of a conflict with the fight with Yuhaba and Ichibe.
eBay.
Yeah. Um, and also, what makes it weirder is just the inclusion of Illustrated Guide to Soul Reapers right at the end of it. But it felt like they didn't really have any budget to do this because there was no real animation here. It's just the character portraits with voiceovers, and there's no animation. It's just voice acting and the character profile. The character portraits just talking to each other. Like, I was a little bit disappointed because I did actually like the Illustrated Guide to Soul Reapers in the original series. It was like, I mean, I would question how canon the situations are. I think it's mostly just skits anyway. But I mean, they were kind of funny. But here it was just kind of, I don't know. It was just kind of weird, like with the way they handled it. I still thought some parts were humorous, but it's also just really, it feels really just kind of weird to put right after something so like dark and serious as most of the episode was, to have something like that like right at the end of it. And it feels just kind of out of place, to be honest. Like, and it's also something I was wondering why they didn't include earlier on in the season. Like, why of all episodes they decided to sort of like throw it in here.
Yeah, it's like all other past illustrated guide skits were like only lasted maybe about 30 to less than a minute at a time. This one it just lasted like 4 or 5 minutes of this episode.
Yeah. Those are the only things I kind of had complaints about with these two episodes. Well, with really just the last episode, honestly. Like, everything else I thought was great, but then it was like that was just kind of like it ended on a weird, at sort of a weird point in the story, and it also just the weird, just the random inclusion of Illustrated Guide to Soul Reaper is just sort of, it's I don't know. I didn't really, I don't know why they decided to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean at least I mean we still have like the next core that's airing in 2024. I mean
Well, yeah. So so
there's still no solid release date or month of whenever that's going to
yeah.
be. But if I have to guess, it would likely have to be in spring of next year.
Yeah. So similarly with the ending of the last core, they did release a trailer like right after the last episode, aired. So like we at least get a trailer for the next core, um, like with the first one. But again, I just didn't like the way that they kind of ended things with this one.
Yeah. So starting off, we go back to the Seirite, in which we see the rest of the Vizards. Was it Hiyori, Lisa? I think Love Aiko show up to help out, but of course, Urahara tells them that they're too late to help because Ichigo and the others are already launched up and into that rocket heading into well, what was it? The Soul Palace, and then we're introduced to the new character, who is Yushiro Shihoin, who is Yoruichi's little brother.
Mm.
Which like just like I was a little bit taken aback about about this introduction because I never, at least from what I from watching the entire series, I've never heard of this character until just now.
Yeah, it just kind of comes out of nowhere because I was like, when I first saw the character, I was like, that just looks like a younger version of Yoruichi. And I was like wondering if it was actually some kind of a flashback at first, but I knew it couldn't be because of the way everything looked. But then, of course, it was revealed that it's someone who's related to Yoruichi. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah, it is
it's
weird. Like, we never really, I don't remember, at least from the original series, them really referencing this character before.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we don't even get to see this character in like in the what was it, the Urahara and the Aizen flashback from way back when Kisuke was still a captain at the time, but they never introduced Yoruichi's little brother uh, at any point in that time. Of course, we did get like a younger um what was it, a younger version of Byakuya at the time, but Yushiro just like he just pops up out of nowhere saying that he wants to help his sister, and then of course is disappointed to hear that you know his sister is like is already like launched into that rocket with Ichigo and the others.
Yeah. Uh, Another thing I guess I would point out that I was a little bit disappointed with this core as a whole was that, speaking of Ichigo, is I really felt like he got, at least with this part of the story, like he just gets really like sidelined almost like I've never seen before. Like I mean, most of this core focuses on the other captains, the other, the lieutenants. The beginning of it, Ichigo is just walking that path toward the shrine, and then he's spending a lot of time with where's in the royal palace before he comes back to the Serete, and it's mostly just the one scene where he fights against the Bambis, where he gets to really do anything, and he just sort of wipes the floor with them. So it was a fairly
Yeah,
one-sided fight scene anyway, and then and then he just goes up in that rocket, and it pretty much is, we just see the other characters fighting off the Quincy's and Yuhoba. Ichigo isn't really directly involved at this point, where he's just going up in the rocket. So I was a little bit disappointed with that. I was kind of hoping for a little bit more of Ichigo, but I felt like he really got sidelined in that around this part of the story.
yeah. Speaking of the Bambis, we do get one weird scene, which Giselle tries to heal himself by sucking out Bambietta's blood. I mean, they really did Bambietta dirty in this freaking core. It's just like, what the hell? It's it. I mean, just the amount of like physical abuse that Bambietta has gotten. Like she was like a popular character when she popped up back in the first core, but the way the way she's been handled in this core right now, just like
You
it
almost feel
just
kind of
just
bad for
completely
her with
destroyed.
what I mean.
Yeah,
She gets turned into a zombie and is pretty much just abused by Giselle.
yeah. I mean, he just basically just smashes her head in over and over and over, just being, you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they're gonna even bring Bambietta back at this point, considering like how she's being you know treated in this way, um unless she gets brought back to life of sorts. I don't know
I
if
feel like they made
if
Giselle
that's even
also
possible.
like extra creepy in like, yeah, episode 25. Once we see him again, where he's just sort of, he's in that cave and you just see his eyes glowing, and he's just like, you see like he's really, of course, obviously really angry because of him losing so badly earlier, and he's trying to recover. And then when Toto comes into the cave and is seeing what he does, like, you just kind of see his eyes glowing in the darkness, like staring back at her. It just looked really like, I mean, they really made Giselle like just look, I mean, just really like unsettled, just really off putting. Uh,
Yeah, but yeah, so but pretty much like the remainder of the last two episodes is focused on Squad Zero and uh pretty much the Stern Ritters that are up on the Soul Palace.
I will say too,
At the
like
time where
it was I was interested in hearing like from some people who said they read the manga and they said that I don't really I kind of am curious about like how Squad Zero was treated in the manga at this part of the story because they were saying that I guess Squad Zero were in the manga. It seemed like they got I guess they kind of got their ass. It seemed like they got their ass handed to them in these fights with the with I think the Royal Guard or the Quincy's. Um, but in the anime, it's a completely different story from what I've seen because it really seemed like Squad Zero. They really like showed just how completely overpowered Squad Zero really is. Um,
I wouldn't say they're
well, not
overpowered of
overpowered,
sorts.
but
It's
just
just
how powerful they are. Because the I guess the manga doesn't really do a good job of showing that, or it sort of even though they're supposed to be like above all the other squads in the Soul Society. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, it had me kind of curious as to how they were handled in the manga versus how they were handled here, because it's sort of
yeah.
like it seems like the polar opposite here where they were. Like they're basically like treated as pretty much as essentially on the same level of like gods.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first battle, of the finale, it's like we see Ichibei fighting. You know, we see, of course, Ichibei fighting Yuhaba, using, I guess you could say, his Zanpak Tove swords, but it's just a giant brush with. I don't know if you could really call that thing like a blade or just like a brush head of sorts, but
Well,
it's confusing of like how he's describing it.
It it apparently can appear as a blade, I guess. But I'm wondering if that's like a hallucination or if that's just like its true form or what the case is. Um, but he has like a really weird ability where he says he can erase names or he can erase part of a name and then it just and like for instance, when they're fighting, he throws like he uses the paintbrush and throws like some throws it at him or throws ink at him, where he just erases part of the word arm, like it's just AR or something, like so he can't he loses function of, or at least like function one, or I think it was one of his arms, I'm not exactly, or no, I think it was both of his arms. They lose some of their function and he's not as I guess able to use them as well.
Yeah. So eventually, Ichibei does manage to beat to. I don't know. I don't know. You could say if you beat him, but I guess it gets to the point where Yuhab is beaten so badly that he uses like this weird ability in which he transfers, I guess, the powers or the life force of other Quincy's into all of his subordinates up above, by the Soul Palace.
Oh, you mean that when he uses Ashwallen?
Yeah, the Ashwallen ability,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
it
So
is, and
Ashwallen, it was something that was explained uh, in the first core where it was sort of like uh, where it was how like Ichigo's mother died, and it's pretty much just consuming all the powers of of the Quincy's that I guess that like he deems, or that Yuhaba deems unworthy. All those I guess that are deemed unworthy, that they I guess they also die and they don't only get their powers taken, but they also are killed. I'm not exactly sure how it works. I think because some of them they just have their powers taken away. Some of them it seems like they just get completely like their exist, or they just have their life force completely drained. Um,
um,
but
I think Toto and Giselle managed to avoid having their powers taken or whatever it is.
yeah,
But we see like Bosby and a couple of other Bambi Stern Ritters having their powers taken from them. All of the other lower class Quincy's are all like have their life forces completely sucked out to the point where they're just husks and skeletons at this point.
yeah, and it seems like Thasby and Toto are not too pleased with Yuhabai using this method, uh, and
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm wondering if they might even try to turn against him because of it, because they didn't
I mean,
anticipate, I guess, him doing this. But
like there were hints that Bosby and some of the other characters, some of the other Quincy characters are not happy with the way Yuhaba's been handling stuff, or like in terms of his decision making. Like for example, like making Uryu his successor of sorts, and
Yeah.
Bosby in particular is not entirely pleased with that decision. So it seems like they're hinting at some kind of like, but at some kind of like betrayal, in terms of like some of the Quincy's against Yuhaba of sorts.
Uh,
Because I mean, at first they can't really discuss it at him or confront Yuhaba in person because they're afraid of like of incurring his wrath.
yeah.
But it seems like this might end up being the breaking point for them from if assuming if some of them manage to survive this.
Yeah. But yeah, Yuaba basically did this pretty much because he was in the Ichibei fight. He was like backed into a corner. He had his voice taken away earlier, but he was able to like sort of able to restore it because he had his voice taken away and he was like knocked down by Ichibei, and he was able to like sort of use like I think some reishi to bring it back, but he couldn't really fully restore like the functionality of his arms, so he just decided to use Ashwallen to, I pretty much bring himself to full power, I suppose.
Mhm.
But at the same time, we see these fights between Squad Zero and the I guess Yuhaba's like royal guard, the ones that he selected to go up with him to the royal palace, which was like Askin, and then these other Quincy's, one that looks like a Valkyrie, and then the guy with like the giant, like it looks like an anti-tank rifle, um, who is like fighting uh, the creator of the Zanpakuto. It was not
Yeah. Oh, is it
Oetsu,
Oetsu?
yeah.
Yeah.
But the fights at first are pretty one-sided with a lot of them, or well, at least at first it seemed like Oetsu was not doing so well because of Ask. We get to see what Askin's ability is, which is like it's kind of basically like it seems like he's able to make the blood in your body like lethal in a way, where like
Yeah, just
you
I don't know how that
yeah I
works. It's just he just basically just licking his own blood, or I don't know, maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's Oetsu's blood. I don't know, like whose blood it was, but
yeah
he just kept licking at it,
oh
and Oetsu just basically just collapses down on the floor.
yeah.
But then he avoids it by just slitting his own throat and then just releasing all that diluted blood in his system, which is like, I mean, he should be dead at this point, but I mean, they go to this whole thing about like kind of how much blood, um, like like a person can have, or how much a person can lose based on their like their weight of sorts. But it's a little bit
Well, yeah,
confusing
apparently
at
Askin
times.
has the ability to just sort of accurately guess as to what amount of blood a person has in their body based off of their body weight, and he has a pretty close guess as to what Oetsu's actual body weight is, and based on that, he's able to, I guess, calculate how much blood is actually in his body.
Yeah, and of course, Uetsu manages to counter this by getting Tenjiro to help out by bringing like his blood red hot spring water up into the battlefield somehow, and then just eventually helps Uetsu recover any lost blood he had by getting rid of all the diluted blood that he had with I guess prior, which I guess whatever works, I guess. And then like the remainder of the battle, like it's just mainly a back and forth between Squad Zero and the Royal Guard Stern Ritters. There was just like a lot of false finishes in this fight in regards to like how somehow like you think like one side would win, but then all of a sudden like they just come like some of the combatants come back from whatever grievous injuries they sustain. Like for example, Oetsu, he gets shot in the abdomen and has a giant hole in his chest, and then Senjumaru like somehow like sews in like a new set of flesh for him, and he just recovers instantly.
It is kind of funny because I mean, pretty much because of what happens like not too long after that too, because like after they get their the Ash Wallen happens and they sort of get their power. They all get powered up from it. Um, what was it? The woman with the arms. I keep forgetting her.
Yeah,
Senjumaru. Yeah. She
Senjumaru.
basically decides to. Well, they all. I wasn't sure if they were actually dead, but yeah, they all pretty much like kill themselves. Well, the other members of Squad Zero kill themselves to basically, I guess, lend their powers to her, and then she activates her Bankai, which I have no idea. Like, it's how to even pronounce the name of the Bankai she uses. It's like some ridiculous name.
It's a long
Yeah,
name. It's a long. This is the longest Bankai name I've ever seen. This it's like
it's
it's
the
really
Bankai
difficult to
itself
pronounce.
is really just crazy too. I have no idea how this actually works. Like, it's some kind of I mean, it kind of relates back to her, like this sort of like theme of her sewing things. It's just like this sort of like world she creates where it's a giant, like what looks to be some kind of a giant sewing machine, and she just sort of traps each of the royal guard members uh in like these, sort of traps them in these different areas where she like kills them in different ways. And one of them gets like sucked into a void or something, like the like with black sand void, or iron sand. um and the Hashwald is like, it looks to be, at least it seems like he was burned alive, which I kind of have a hard time believing that Hashwald was actually, of course, that some of these characters were killed
Yeah,
because of how important Hashwald is. Urdu as well, even, like, he's trapped in this area where he's like shown, I guess, some kind of the Quincy cross, and he's sort of like transfixed by it, and like, I guess, drawn into it, and he's like sucked into some kind of a void, or I'm not exactly sure, but uh of course, I find a hard time believing that, have a hard time believing Urdu is dead as well. I highly doubt it, but uh
I mean, based on what she did, it looks like she turned every single person that was sucked into that dimension into like just basically just like into cloth at this point.
yeah.
You can just see the silhouettes of all their bodies, just like just basically just sewn into just cloth itself. So
Well,
that's
I also
pretty
like
much
with how powerful they really showed her Bankai to be, because she said that she, the whole time, that of course they weren't really fighting seriously before she activates her Bankai, and that, like, if she were to activate it, that it would shake the heavens and the earth, or it would basically like shake the three worlds, the world of living and the Soul Society, and I guess the Wake Mundo, which we actually see like what happens when she uses it, because it seems like there's an earthquake going on in the world of the living, as she activates it, and even the Soul Society feels it. So
yeah, but somehow Ichigo and the others feel it too while they're in that rocket, which I don't know how that's even possible, how they can just feel something like that,
yeah.
unless if they feel some kind of turbulence of sorts. But
Oh, we should also mention
it's
too, I
yeah.
think we might have forgotten about it, because it's kind of a brief scene, but we do also see Ukitake come back. Um,
Oh yeah. He's like it was a post credit scene in the first episode, in which what was it? Shunsui leaves this post to meet up with Ukitake, and he has this like what was it? He has this like this outfit wrapped around his body to combat his terminal illness, so he can
yeah,
join the fight.
yeah. That's going to be pretty interesting, because he hasn't been involved in at all for the most part. So I'm kind of wondering what he's going to do. Um, but yeah, so yeah, she activates her Bankai, and also at the same time we transition back to the fight with Ichibei
With
and Yuhaba, um, where we see Ichibei use the ability Ichimonji, um, where he basically just he says that basically, like, it's the ability where he consumes all the black in the world and paints and use it to, I guess, paint everything black, or something like that. It's kind of hard to explain. Like he basically uses that against Yuhaba, um, and well, at first he does, and then Yuhaba like doesn't really seem like he was affected by it, but of course it's just like a fake out. But yeah, it's like uh, he he tells Yuhaba that he's basically that he's an ant and or that he's no more than an ant, and I guess in a way it sort of becomes reality. Um, and Yuhaba is just completely painted over in black at this point. Um,
Yeah. And then he eventually and then Ichibei basically just crushes Yuval, well, like an ant by by using his two hands by just basically just clapping his two hands together to crush Yuhaba. And then yeah, that's where the episode ends on such a weird place.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
obviously, I think we can all assume that Yuoba is going to come back from this as well because he's come back before, where with everything else that Ichibe's thrown at him. Um, I mean, I'm just wondering. I'm just kind of wondering how he's going to. Um, but
I mean he basically, well, he got away from his fight from
because
Yamamoto, but I mean he wasn't technically
yeah.
there. I
Well,
mean,
and in
and he
this
was just
fight,
basically
it
using.
feels like he's already kind of pulled out his trump card, which was the Ashwallen. But I'm kind of wondering like what else he really has up his sleeve that he can use, uh, that he hasn't already used. So yeah, I mean, it does kind of leave you guessing as to what Yuhapa is going to do, especially with the position he's in now. But it is just a really weird way to end things off with this core because it just feels kind of it feels like, I mean, well, yeah, of course it's going to be inconclusive because we're not really done with the arc or anything, but it's like I mentioned before, the first core at least it felt like that with Ichigo's sort of personal journey that was somewhat concluded with him coming to that realization. Um, but here it just feels like we're just stopping like right in the middle of this fight, and we have to wait until next year for things to continue.
Yeah, it's just, and plus, like I said, the second episode, like, was only like what, like 15 minutes long, and then like the credits roll, and then we get the illustrated guide to Soul Reapers just basically just taking over the rest of the episode.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like they needed something to fill the rest of the episode, and it just felt like the whole thing sort of was an afterthought with how it was done. Um, it just felt like they didn't really have anything else to use, so they just decided to bring back Illustrated Guide to Soul Reapers.
I think that obviously there was more to this fight,
Yeah.
than what was being
Well, maybe
shown,
they
but
just didn't have
I
another
don't
good
think.
ending, stopping point for the fight itself, so they
Yeah,
had to stop it here.
yeah, it makes sense, but I don't know why. I don't know what stopped them from even making, like, I don't know, maybe like a 27th episode, to at least conclude this fight of sorts. Just to make it in a way where it hypes up, the next season after this. But it
Yeah.
just feels like, it just didn't feel like, it didn't feel like much of a cliffhanger of sorts. I mean, you would think that at this point of the episode that you would see like all the bad guys, being like looking victorious, over the good guys, and then we have to wait till the next season. Here it's like the opposite effect, in which we see the good guys just basically just beating the bad guys, and then we have to wait till for the next season to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Yeah, it's I mean, and we know that of course, like just knowing the kind of character Yuaba is, that he's not going to go down so easily. But yeah, I mean, it does, like I said, it does kind of leave you guessing as to what else he really has to use. Um, but yeah, I don't really have too much else to say about the episode though. I thought for the most part, like these last two episodes were really good. I just don't really like the way that they ended things off with the score, especially in comparison to the first one. It felt like they just kind of had to stop at a certain point, and it wasn't the best way to sort of to conclude this particular part of the season.
Yeah, especially, of course, like using up the remaining broadcast time for the illustrated guide. I mean, I don't mind it. It's just a weird way for them to bring back that comedy skit. in well, in such a manner than, the way that it did. Unlike the way they did like the other ones in which we had like, almost like comedic slice of life moments with some of the characters of what they do, like, when they're not fighting.
Yeah.
This one is just like, we just have like portraits of the characters' faces just, with dialogue, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
it was just kind of funny conversations between them. It was like the conversation with Kone, Ichigo and Kone, and then there was like an exchange between Rukia and Renji, kind of where Renji, I guess, goes over like what was it, Sanjibar, like yeah,
Shinjimori,
like
yeah.
her having to get his measurements, uh, and him being embarrassed about it, and this kind of the extent
Mhm.
of it. I mean, it was kind of funny, but it's just I felt like the originals were just done better. But I feel like it was just something that felt like it was just sort of added in like at the last minute because they didn't know what else to do.
Yeah, it's just like I said, it's just a weird way for them to end it off in this manner before before of course the next season, which is gonna be sometime maybe around spring of next year. I could be wrong. It could, they could do it a little bit earlier, but honestly, spring is the most likely date for them to air the third season.
Yeah, but I think this second core as a whole, like it was, I would say it was definitely better than the first core. But I do have some mixed feelings about certain things. I guess like there were certain things I liked a little bit better about the first core. Mostly just that it was more focused on Ichigo and the original, his friends. Of course, they got separated at some point, but it was more focused on them. I did like that, it did focus on the other characters in this core as well, but I felt like it was just a little bit too focused on them, and Ichigo was just really sidelined. But to be fair, there were other parts of Bleach that were kind of also like that. Like Fake Karakura Town, for instance, it was kind of like this as well, where it was mostly just the fights with all the other captains and lieutenants against the Arankars, where Ichigo was it was specifically like right after the fight with Ichigo and Ukiura, where Ichigo had to try to find his way back to where they were fighting Aizen. But I felt like even still at that point in the story, they gave Ichigo a little bit more to do. Where here it felt like he's really like doesn't have as nearly as much screen time. Um, but
Yeah,
the f-
like he only had like one good fight scene with like specifically against the Bambi characters.
Yeah, because I mean that
Um,
was the other thing I was really kind of excited about after the first core was I wanted to see what his new abilities were, like how he was going to utilize the dual blades, and we kind of get a pretty good indication of that, but it's just I feel like it's just over really quick at the same time.
yeah, and also the fact that Ichigo like goes down to to the Serite to fight off some of the Stern Ritters, but then all of a sudden Yuhavak and the other and his and his cohorts like go up to the Soul Palace, and Ichigo has to go back up to the Soul Palace, which he just recently came back down
Yeah, I
from.
didn't think about it that way.
Just
Yeah.
just to fight you. Yeah, just to fight Yuhavak, of course.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I will say like it did feel like the fights, like the animation, even though the animation was great in the first core, like it did like they even said before this came out that the animation was going to be better, and I definitely think it took a step up from the first core, even though like the first core, like I said, still looked really good. Like, I mean, this one I felt like looked even better for the most part. There was a lot of like really memorable, like really good fights. This one definitely had a lot more fights, which I thought was really good. Like, because a lot of them looked great. I didn't really have any complaints about any of them. Uh, I think
Yeah.
the
I
standouts were
mean, there
definitely
were.
like the Kenpachi fight, um, and that one Ichigo fight, even though it was just very one sided. Um,
Yeah.
but you know,
There were a couple fights which I really didn't feel like it was really necessary. Like particularly like that whole Pepe fight against Byakuya. I don't
yeah,
like Pepe was just like a random Quincy character that just shows up
it
out of
didn't feel
nowhere,
like it
which
was like a
just
fight you were really supposed to, I guess, take that seriously. It felt more like it was mostly just kind of a joke because Pepe just feels like a character you're not. I mean, he just feels like very much a joke character, like you're not really supposed to take him seriously. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why that had to take up like an entire episode just to watch, just to watch that happen. I mean, he just like literally just shows up and then just gets killed off by the end of the episode.
yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't really have too much else to say about these last two episodes. I mean, I would say the core itself, like so far, like the season, Thousand Year Blood War, I would say I would say it's been a 9 for me so far. If I were to score it, I mean, it's been just really, it's been pretty great. I mean, it's probably the some of the best. I mean, the best comeback you could hope for Bleach. Of course, it's not without its flaws, but I think for the most part, it's been pretty solid, especially with with how the manga readers have said it's like expanded on material from the manga and shown us things that weren't even in the manga.
Yeah, it's just like you, it's like the only complaints that we have is just Ichigo getting sidelined for much of this core, and of course that the underwhelming way they ended off the season.
Yeah. Yeah, but that all being said, guys, until I guess until next year, we will see you all next time.